It seems to me that I have always known this, and that I came into this world knowing that you become what you think about, whether you want it or not. I was really very blessed. I lived in an orphanage until I was 10, in a series of foster homes with my older brother, but he was sick quite a bit. He was very anemic, and I used to have to help him as a young boy. He was 16 months older than I was, and this was when I was 4, 5, 6, and 7, and so on. And I can remember I lived out in Mount Clemens, Michigan, at 231 Town Hall Road with a lady. Her name was Mrs. Scarf, and she had a lot of children would come and go from there. And I was in a foster home because the circumstances at that time were such that my father had walked out on his family, and I was born in the Depression, and there was no welfare and things like that in those days. So it was like people just helped each other out. And my mother was working as a candy girl in Detroit, on the east side of Detroit, earning $17 a week, and she just didn't have the money and wasn't able to provide for her children. So we lived out at this one particular place, and I can remember whenever a new child would come to the house, they would always say, "Go find Wayne." And I would be out in the back. They had orchards there, and this was no hardship. This was no difficult thing for me. This was a great blessing, I think, in my life. Those earliest days. And I can remember a girl named Martha came, and they were dropping her off for basically the same reasons that we were dropped off there. And they said, "Go find Wayne." And I came and I started talking to Martha, and she was crying, and she was all upset, and she was sad, and I was trying to convince her that she didn't have to be sad, that this was, and I remember saying to her, "This is a great place. There's no parents here. You can do pretty much anything that you want. I mean, you've got a lot of freedom, and we're going to have a great time." And I can remember being in school, at the public school. It was a numbered school. They didn't even name them in that day. It was PS number 127. And I remember the teachers, one time we were out on the playground and all the kids were all upset, and I said, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Well, the teacher said this is the worst class that she ever had," and she was so all upset, and she was angry, and she was hurt, and I said, "Well, why would you allow her opinions to have anything to, if this is her hardest day, then her life is just easy, and I can remember talking to other people about all you have to do is change the way you think. And it goes from being a miserable experience or a tough experience or a hard experience to one that you can do anything that you want with. And when my mother got our family all back together again when I was nine, almost 10 years old. And I can remember her telling me what it was like when I was just a baby, when I was just like an infant, that I was the one child that could make everybody else laugh. At times when everybody else would. She said we were waiting for a bus one time when we were just real babies before I went into the orphanage, and she said a car came by, and it was in Detroit, and there was all this slush, and we all went flying down. Everybody had dirt on them and dirty snow, and we were laying in the ground, and everybody was crying. And she said you were and upset and mad because our clothes were wet and so on. And she said you just stood up and said, "This is great, isn't this wonderful? Look, we don't have to do this, and we don't, just turning it into something positive." It's like, so the ability to be able to do that was something, I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't know that if I really went to work on how I thought, that things just didn't have to be bad. I was the richest kid in the orphanage. I've talked about that many times in my lectures, that a snowstorm was a time we had 2 snow shovels at the home, and one of them had the edges all curled up from hitting the curbs, and you couldn't make any money with that one. So the other one, when it would snow, I would go downstairs and I would take the good snow shovel and I would put it under my bed, and I'd sleep with it right with me in the bed so that nobody else would get it. And I would get up before everybody else got up, and I would go out and I would just shovel everybody else's snow, shovel the walk. And then later on, and I just go knock on the door and just tell them that I shoveled their walk. And they'd say, some would say thank you, and some would give me a dime, which doesn't sound like much, but that's about $3,000 in today's money. And when I found out that soda pop bottles, for example, were worth 2 cents each, that if you took them back, you could get 2 cents back. I mean, that was just like one of the great awarenesses and awakenings of my life, because I would follow people around who were drinking a Coca-Cola and say, you almost done with that? They said, well, no, I'm not. Well, just whenever you're ready. I just follow them and said, we'll walk until, and I had we had a coal bin where we lived, because it was coal furnaces, and we filled that coal bin with soda pop bottles, and I would take it back. It was just always easy to change, and all the other kids would be not having any money and complaining about not being able to have abundance or be able to have some level of being able to buy themselves like just a little donut or a Pepsi-Cola or something. They couldn't figure it out, and it always seemed so easy to me that all you had to do was just look around and see the opportunities in anything, and it had nothing to do with whether there are opportunities there. There always are opportunities. You know, I'm 67 years old. I have never, ever been unemployed or even can't even deal with the concept of unemployment. It isn't that I've had no job. I've always had more jobs than and it isn't because I've been through all good economic times. There've been some pretty sour economic times over the last 50 years or so. I just have never known how to think any other way than if you change the way you think about things, you can create whatever it is you want for yourself in your life. It's just a simple knowing. I mean, I've made a living talking about it. I've written lots of books about it and so on, but I have always lived it and practiced it, and I still do today. It was Thomas Troward. I don't know. He did some lectures on mental science way back in the 1907, 1908. He was from Scotland. And one of the things that he said is that the law of flotation was not discovered by the contemplation of the sinking of things. So that, you know, like before the 15th and 16th centuries, all of the ships were made out of wood. Not because iron wasn't available and steel wasn't available, but because there was a belief that wood floated. So therefore you had to make ships out of things that floated. That's literally how and then someone came along and said that it has absolutely nothing to do with what things are made out of. It has to do with the amount of water that is being dispersed. That's what determines whether something will float or not. And I think about that all the time, because it's in the contemplation of what you desire that you create what it is that you want to have for yourself. It's in your willingness to contemplate it, and nothing more, according to Troward and mental science. So that I think about the Wright brothers, you know, 100 or so years ago. You know, it's like, and I said the law of flying was not discovered by the contemplation of the staying on the ground of things. So that these were two people, like for me, to figure out how to get an airplane to fly, in my limited knowledge of all of that, I would probably have contemplated the staying on the ground of things. You know, it's like, this is what happened. But there's somebody came along and contemplated the idea that if you get enough speed going and you have the right design and you get pressure underneath something like this, and you get that this thing is going to lift off the other. Somebody had to contemplate that idea. And everybody who contemplated that it wasn't possible, that it couldn't work, was a part of why flying didn't take place, because there was no new law discovered in the early part of the 20th century. Any more than electricity was discovered by, you know, Thomas Edison or anyone like that. I mean, the ability to have electricity has always been there. Somebody has to contemplate. So it's like in your own personal life, your willingness to contemplate yourself as a person who is capable of attracting into your life what you want, having the kind of relationships that you want, being able to have abundance where you know, scarcity always exists. All you have to do is begin the process by being willing to contemplate the presence of that in your life. And I've always been a person that I can remember throughout my life as someone who could contemplate myself being able to do things that most people couldn't. And I can give you a good example. When my mother got us all back together, and we were living in Detroit, on the east side of Detroit, and we got a new television set. It was a black and white. It was a screen about this big. It was an Admiral. And we had it in our home, and it was like, oh my God, black and white television, you know. You remember Uncle Milty and all and so on. And there was a guy that was on TV. His name was Steve Allen, and he was on The Tonight Show. And I was 11, 12, 13 years old. I was born in 1940, so I was 51 or 52. And I used to stay up every night and watch The Tonight Show. even though I had to go to school the next day, there was just something about that show, and you know, all of the characters and smock and all the things that Steve Allen would do on it. And I would come down when I would be talking the next day, and I would be telling my mother and my two brothers that when I do the Tonight Show, this is what I would say. I wouldn't have said what Louis Nye say, the way reacted, how he reacted to that. I would have said this, and I used to do this. And my brothers and my mother would say, "That's just Wayne. He's just nutty. He thinks he's on the Tonight Show. He thinks he's going to do the Tonight Show." And I would go up into my room at, on this little tiny house that we lived in, a little 2-bedroom house that 5 of us lived in because my mother remarried, and I would see myself doing the Tonight Show. I would just practice it, and Steve Allen became someone that I was really enamored of. Well, fast forward, I don't know, 30 years or whatever, and I've written a book, Your Erroneous Zones, and the Tonight Show calls, and they ask me if I would like to come on and do it. So I do my first stint on the Tonight Show. I did the show like 37 times over a period of 3 or 4 years with all these different hosts, but Johnny Carson was on, and the first guest on the very first show when I did the show was Steve Allen. And it was like something clicked in me that I had contemplated that as a child. I had always had a knowing, and I can remember sitting there talking to Johnny about this thing that, and Steve Allen was sitting there right next to me, and we were talking about that kind of thing. So that by putting my attention on something, it wasn't some deliberate thing that I was doing, when I was 11 or 12 years old that was designating that I was going to be a person who was going to be appearing on talk shows 30 years from now. It was just an awareness a willingness to contemplate myself in that kind of a place. And I think the power of contemplation is the thing that most people haven't harnessed yet. And when you harness it in your life, there's absolutely no limit to what you can attract into your life. If you absolutely stay focused on what it is that you're going to manifest and attract, you're not going to do it in your time. Jackson Browne sings a song, he says, "And creation reveals its secrets by and by." I mean, you can't push the river. You can't, it's all done in divine time, but it will show. It will show. It will manifest. It will attract itself. And I'm never surprised any longer about anything that I put my thoughts on, that I can attract it into my life. I just absolutely know that law of attraction, and that it absolutely works. And I have absolutely no doubt about it. And I feel as if, like, before I even came into this world, when I was in the world of spirit, that I had a conversation with God. And it was God saying to me, like, what would you like to do in this lifetime? And I said, well, I'd really like to spend a lifetime teaching self-reliance, because that's truly all I've ever done since the time I was just a little boy, through all my life. I mean, I could just go through all of the things that I've done. It's been always about teaching self-reliance. And God said, it's like, you're sure you want to spend a whole lifetime teaching self-reliance? I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. And he said, well, we better get your little ass into an orphanage then. Rumi said, this ancient Persian poet, brilliant, beautiful poet, he said, sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. It feels like bewilderment. It feels like awe. It feels like, even as I think about it now, I can feel myself tearing up behind my eyes, because only I know what is going on behind my eyeballs. It feels like so glorious and so sweet and so trusting, so knowing. There's just this powerful knowing that you're not alone. There's this. That it's like there's a safety, there's a sense of that you're not alone. I had this great experience years ago. There's a friend of mine, he's on KTAR radio station in Phoenix. His name's Pat McMahon, Irish Catholic guy. And Mother Teresa is to be his guest, right, on the same day that I'm his guest. So we're in the studio, and Mother Teresa comes in. Now, she's about 4'10", maybe weighs 80 pounds. And she's there to talk about a homeless shelter that she slept in the night before, to tell the people of Phoenix about this homeless shelter. And I'm there to talk about a book that I don't know which one it was. It was 10, 15 years ago. So Pat tells Mother Teresa, is there anything that I can do for you? And you can imagine the bewilderment and the awe that this is an Irish Catholic guy from, living in Phoenix, and Mother Teresa, a saint, is coming there, and he's just bewildered. He's beyond bewildered. He just doesn't know what to do with himself. He's just so honored. And he says, is there anything I can do for you, Ma? Is there anything I can do? And she said, no. She said, I just came here to talk about the homeless shelter. He said, but Mother Teresa, he said, we have a 50,000-watt clear channel station that goes in every direction. It's like he's got his ego involved. Like we can help you to raise a lot of money for your work and your mission in Calcutta. And she said, no, I'm not interested in raising money or your radio station getting a. She said, I just want to talk about the homeless shelter. That's all. And he's exasperated. And finally, he's down on his knees, really. And finally, she says, stand up. She said, you seem so serious. She said, there is one thing that you can do. And he just stood up and he said, well, what is it? I'd do anything. She said, well, tomorrow morning, she said, get up at 4 a.m. And she said, and go out onto the streets of Phoenix and find someone who's living there, who believes that he's alone, and convince him that he's not. That's what you can do. And behind the feeling we're talking about here is this feeling of aloneness for so many people who are lost in the world, that I don't have like a connection to something greater than myself. I've come to believe that who I am is what I do and what I have and what other people think about me, and who I am is separate from everybody else. And who I am is separate even from what I'd like to attract into my life, that I'm separate from all the things that are missing, and I'm separate even from God. And that there's a place within me that knows that I'm not separate from any of that. That if there's no place that God is not, or that source is not, or the energy that provides, that is always giving and always creating is not, if there's no place that it is not, then it has to be in me. I know that. And if there's no place that is not, and it has to be in me, it has to be also in everything that is missing in my life, or that I think is missing. It's there too. So that in some mysterious, invisible way, I'm already connected to everything that's missing in my life through something called spirit. And when I recognize that I'm not here as this human being having a spiritual experience, when you recognize that your essence is that you are a spiritual being, having a human experience, not the other way around. When you really get that, I mean, not that you can say it and it's clever, but when you know that who you are is this essence, you don't see, there's no other, there's no them. There's nothing outside of you. You're connected to everyone and everything. As the Native Americans would say, that no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. Living the Tao Te Ching, this 2,600-year-old, some people call it the greatest, the wisest book ever written. It speaks so much about relationships. Tao, the word Tao means the great way. It's just another synonym for God, or source, or spirit, or that which is the all-creating. And one of the things that it says that was really helpful to me, probably the most helpful thing in it, was that whenever you have a conflict of any kind, in any relationship, whenever you have a conflict, that the person who is willing to be of Tao, of God, of Source, is the one who will practice forgiveness, or will go to the person that they have a conflict with and bring love to it, instead of the freeze out, instead of the anger, instead of the hatred, instead of the revenge, instead of so many of the things that we do when we have conflicts in our lives. We just don't talk to that person. Like, I'm not talking to that. I'm not talking to him. He's going to call me because I called the last time, and that's going. But the person who lives the Tao life, the life of a higher consciousness, is the person who says, "I end all conflicts on love," which is where we all come from. We come from a source that is love. So for me, that has been just so useful. I have 8 children, and that's been just extraordinarily helpful for me to be in a relationship where I can always be of love, where I can just, and so then you don't even, conflicts become something that are no longer present, because conflict requires two-ness. In order to have a conflict, you have to have two different opinions or whatever. But if you live in oneness, if you really see yourself in everyone else, see yourself in all the things, including the plants, including the animals, and including all beings and so on. If you just suspend this ego part of you and just see yourself in that other person, then your arguments are really with yourself, and your hatreds are really about yourself. And you begin to really see that I don't have to project anything onto anyone else that isn't what I choose to be. You do U-turns in your life. I've done U-turns in my life. And it's having the curiosity, it's having the willingness to say, this isn't working for me. It's like you get bit by a snake and you're bit, okay? But the bite doesn't kill you. You're still there, you don't die from a snake bite. You don't die from you don't get hurt from what somebody else does to you. It's the venom that continues to pour through your system after the bite. That's what causes difficulties in relationships and so on. And when you recognize that to be angry, to be full of revenge, I could bring anybody in this crew in here and do a muscle test with them and ask them a question, to hold your arm out to hold your arm out like this, and think about somebody who's abandoned you, or abused you, who did something that you didn't like, who borrowed money from you and didn't pay it back, who walked out on you, someone that you hate, and just for a moment, hold your arm out as hard as you can. I'm going to put two fingers right here, and I'm going to push down, and you think about getting revenge. You just think about, even if you don't want to do that, just think the thought of, I'm going to get even with that bastard for what he did or what she did. I'm going to really get even with him. And you push, and that you find out that they have no strength when you think a thought of revenge. There's no strength in there. Kinesiology, say, very simple test. Then if I say to yourself, okay.
I have somebody that.
Okay, sit down. All right, here, come over this way. Okay, just put your arm up.
Here?
No, over here.
Over here?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, I'd like you to think of, first of all, tell me your name.
Michael.
Michael what?
Gorgian.
Is that the truth?
Yeah.
Tell me you're telling the truth.
I'm telling you the truth.
My name is?
Michael Gorgian.
And that is the truth? Okay, resist me as hard as you can, okay? And I'm going to just push down, okay? So that's the truth. Now, for just 1 second, just make up a name. But tell me that it's the truth. I want you to lie to me. What is your name?
My name is Ron Garcia.
My name is Ron Garcia. Is that the truth?
Yes, that's the
truth.
truth.
You're telling me the truth?
That's the truth.
Say it again. My name is?
My name is Ron Garcia.
And that is?
The truth.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. You see the shift? Can you see a change in you? Mm-hmm. Can you see a slight change in you?
Yeah,
okay, you're strong.
Felt that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'd like you, I'm just doing that for a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'd like you to think about someone. I'd like you to move over this way. There we go. I'd like you to think about someone in your life that abused you, abandoned you, that did something to, without any details, I don't want to know any of the details, and you are hurt by it, and you are angry about it. And forget about whether you've forgiven them or not. I want you to just think about getting even with them. I want you to think about revenge, okay? I'm going to get even with that person no matter what, okay? And put your arm out, and can you hold on to that thought of revenge, okay? I'm going to get even with that person for what they did. I'm angry at them. And hold on to that thought and just think, resist me as hard as you can, and notice what's happening with your arm. Resist, again, one more time. Think that thought. I'm really going to get angry. I'm really pissed. I'm really hurt. I'm going to get you back for that, okay? And resist me as hard as you can. Now notice what's happening here. You have almost no strength. I'm not even pushing down. I want you to just change the thought.
Okay.
I want you to change the thought right now. And I want you to change it to one of love and forgiveness. I just want you to surround them with the light of God. I want you to surround them with the most beautiful love that you can think of. And just think of that thought. They did what they knew how to do, given the conditions of their life. I can't ask any more of anybody than that. Put your arm out. Put your arm out. Resist me as hard as you can, and forgive them in your heart. And forgive them in your heart. Now get even, get angry, I'm going to get really even with them, and watch what happens. Can you see the change? That's how it works. See? Every thought you have of shame, every thought you have of anger, every thought you have of revenge is a thought that weakens you. Every muscle in your body. It's even in your eye.
Well, I think, even I couldn't look at you when my attention
I could
goes
see the shift.
somewhere.
Your heart is a muscle, isn't it? How many times do we say to our children, you should be ashamed of yourself? Think of, here, watch. Put your arm up. Resist me as hard as you can. Think of a moment in your life when you felt great love. The greatest love you ever felt in your life. Just think of that moment. I don't want to know anything about it. Just think about who it was, okay? Can you think of a moment like that? Great love. Michael is just loved, okay? And look, I can't budge you, right? I'm pushing really hard. Now think of a moment when you felt shame. You just did something and you're just ashamed of it, whatever it was, okay? You think of something like that? Okay. Resist me as hard as you can. You're thinking shame, and just watch what happens to your arm. No matter how hard you try, you have no strength, do you? You have no strength, okay? Now think love. Think love. Just think of that moment and shift. You see the change? Now think shame.
I'm trying hard.
Yeah. Think shame. Just think of shame. You're ashamed. You're really ashamed. Whatever you did, you're really ashamed. You really screwed up, okay? Resist me, sir. Look, you have no strength. Look, you can't. You know where I learned it? I learned it from my dentist. What? My dentist. I had crowns put into my teeth, and he would get me out of the chair. I said, who's this crazy man? You know, he'd get me out of the chair. He was adjusting the occlusion. He'd say, bite down, and then he'd go, and if I'd go weak, he'd say, it's not right yet. And he'd put me back in the chair, he'd adjust it a little more, and he said, now it's perfect. And it always was. It always was. Wow. This is the power.
Who's your dentist?
It's like, what we just demonstrated here is the power of the thoughts that we have. What a thought of shame, a thought of anger, a thought of revenge, what it does to the muscles of our body. The muscles of our, it's like, the reason I ask you to tell me a lie, you know, is because I wanted to test your body, because your body wasn't made by your parents. We like to think that our bodies were made by our parents. That's because you look a certain way and all of that. But if we take the tiny little drop of protoplasm that created you, and we try to find out its origin, and we take it all the way back to subatomic particles and reduce it, we find out when we put it in a particle accelerator and rev it up at 250,000 miles an hour and collide it, and we open it up, there's nothing there. That you came from the invisible, you came from source. It's the spirit that gives life. So that once you understand that this body of yours is a creation not of human beings, but it's a creation of God. It's a creation of source. It's a creation. It came from nowhere, and an invisible source, and manifested into the world of the physical. And so it only reacts to truth, because it was created by truth. So once you lie, this is an ultimate lie detector test. That's why I always say we could have saved $93 million with President Clinton. You know, it's like, come on. Did you have sex or didn't you? Let's get over this, you know. But now you're using an instrument not of human beings. All of our bodies are divine creations, and they only react to truth with strength. The truth that when you go weak, you're going against your Tao nature. Your true nature is not revenge. Your true nature is not hatred. You came from love, and you have to stay in that state. And once you learn that, once you get that, like having that demonstrated could change your life. Just that moment could change forever. People ask me, what is your biggest confusion about humanity? It's like man's inhumanity to man. This recognition that we are something beyond ego. You know, and we don't, we have a divided world, a world that believes that, you know, if you're male, you're different than if you're female. If you're Muslim, you're different than if you're Christian. If you're born on one side of the river, then you're different than the person who wasn't. And we've taken on all of these ego beliefs. And my real strong thing about it is that I think that my generation, when I was in my 20s and so on, we were the generation that had to end a war. You know, we had to end a war. I took my doctoral orals on the 4th of May, 1970. The announcement came on the radio, on the television, you know, at around 4 in the afternoon, that the government had put live bullets into their rifles, and they fired on students who were protesting the war at Kent State, and 4 of them were killed. You can imagine what I felt, because I was really working very hard to try to end that war. When I had to go in and defend my dissertation, which seemed so trivial, when I considered what our government was now doing, we were going to put and all these students were doing was protesting a horrific war where people were dying in huge numbers. I think the new generation, this generation, they're Their job isn't to end a war. It's to end war. It's to end the concept of war. And the concept of war comes out of this ego identification of who we are and a belief that I am what I have and I am what I do and I am what others think of me and I am separate from everyone, separate from God, separate from what's missing, this idea of separation and so on. And we will inch by inch move towards a place where people will begin to recognize their connection to each other rather than their separation, or we'll have to just start all over. We'll have to start it over. As Einstein said, if the next war that is fought, he said, after this one will be fought with, with sticks again. We'll have to start all over again. We'll have to start all over. And it's really about slaying this ego, this massive ego thing. You can see it in our foreign policy. You can see it in the way that we treat it. You can see it on television. You can see it in all of the ads that you see for having to take pills for everything. And that's what I feel my work is about. What my life is about now is ending the concept of hatred and separation.
Every thought we think and every word we speak is creating our future. So we have to be careful about what we say and think. And resentment and, going, grunging as I call it, going over and over and over those past difficulties, they don't do anything but attract more difficulties to you. Because I see life as a boomerang. Like, what you give out comes back to you. And this happens over and over and over again. With a boomerang, whenever you toss it out, it comes back. And if you toss it again, it will come back. So it's the same thing with our thinking and our speaking. It's very important to be appreciative of life and to express gratitude. The universe loves gratitude. And the more grateful you are, the more things you have to be grateful about. And when I say things, I don't mean objects necessarily, but just you improve the quality of your life enormously.
I think what you're saying is that quality of life doesn't mean a really nice house or a really nice
It
car.
can, but it doesn't have to. But what good is a nice car if you are full of resentment all the time and you drive around hating everybody? That's not going to help anything. It's much better if you had an old car and you were grateful and appreciative of life. And I also think it's extremely important that you love and appreciate who you are. Too many of us have grown up believing that we're really not good enough, or we're not worthy, or we don't deserve. And, we are divine, magnificent expressions of life, and we have to know that and experience it and rejoice in it. One of the things I tell people to do a lot is to go to the mirror, especially first thing in the morning before you brush your teeth or anything, and look in the mirror and just say, I love you. I really, really love you. And start connecting with that inner child that's inside. A little kid who's probably been pushed away for a long time. And when you do that, it's amazing how miracles seem to happen.
If you could stress one thing, one concept, or one belief, what would be, and it's probably tough to sum it all up, but what would you say is the absolute most important thing?
Well, I think love who you are and be very grateful for life and very appreciative. Say thank you a lot. I say thank you many, many, many times as a day. Often not to anyone else. I just, oh, thank you. It's so wonderful. Thank you. And it's, you find more and more things to be thankful about. I was driving up today from San Diego, and the wildflowers on the hillsides are just beautiful this year. And I was thinking, I was so glad that I had the opportunity to see them. Because if I stayed down there, I wouldn't have. But this drive, which was, not a drive I particularly wanted to make, it was gorgeous. Now, I'll tell you something that I love people to get if they can. When we have a problem, most of us go, oh, panic, panic, God, what are we going to do, blah, 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 blah. But I have something that I try to get people to say. And the minute there's a problem, you stop and you go, all is well. All is well. Everything's working out for my highest good. And out of this experience, only good will come. And I am safe. And you do this, if it's a small thing, I say it 2 or 3 times. If it's a bigger issue, I babble it incessantly. But all is well, everything is working out for my highest good. Out of this situation, only good will come, and I am safe. Now this quiets your inner turmoil down long enough for the universe to find the solution to the so-called problem. See, when there's problems, we don't have to fix problems so much. We need to fix our thinking and our attitude about how we respond to them. And then you get less and less. And when the solution comes, you say, thank you. I am not a salesperson. I am a teacher. And I work with people who come to me, who want to learn to change their lives. I remember when I first heard that if I was willing to change my thinking, I could change my life. It was like a revelation happened. And I thought, oh my goodness. And then I just spent all my time trying to find out how to do that, because it sounded so wonderful. And there are other people who will never be interested. Maybe next lifetime, or the one after that.
So where do we go from here?
I don't know, but I will find out. Life will bring it to me.